Okay. All right. Well, I'm pleased to be joined by Dr. Eric Anthony Johnson. He is the new president and CEO of Aeon, and you'll be starting that position February 8th. Is that right?
Yep, that is correct.
Well, thank you for joining us, Eric. Really appreciate it.
Yep, thank you very much.
So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. Looks like you have an extensive background in real estate, urban affairs, economic development. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually, my background is pretty diverse. Actually, I started out as a community organizer, organizing neighborhoods to tackle problems around affordable housing, economic development. So my career trajectory has been sort of a combination of, to your point, real estate, policy, community development, capital. It's a very broad background. And to be honest with you, I really developed it that way because I know to really take on the challenges that we face today, you just have to have this comprehensive skill set. So from my PhD, I recently finished my MBA at the University of Tennessee, my real estate work at Harvard, my master's at Minnesota State-Mankato. So it's a pretty broad background. And I was recently a LISC Rubinger Fellow, which is a local initiative support corporation, one of the biggest supporters of community economic development.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm very familiar with LISC and Peter McLaughlin and the good work they do there. Yeah, that's really cool. Yep. So what was your most recent position?
Yeah, recent position until January 28th, Chief of Economic Development, Housing, Neighborhood Services, Construction, and Real Estate Development for the city of Dallas, which is really ninth largest city. I had about close to 500 employees, massive budget, worked on issues related to affordable housing, new economic development policy. Recently, about roughly 3 weeks ago, just raised $100 million, actually working with LISC in a group in Dallas called the Real Estate Council to establish a fund to generate $100 million to start to support affordable housing.
Okay. And what did you like about this opportunity with Aeon? I mean, they've been around a long time and developed just tons of affordable housing. What prompted this decision to get on board here?
Well, first of all, I was familiar with Aeon, having worked in Bloomington and actually doing some work side by side with Aeon. So I was familiar with the mission of Aeon, but more in particular, one thing that really has stood out to me about Aeon is really they have no issue with taking on tough challenges. A lot of people shy away and say, oh, this complex is too hard to deal with. Oh, we don't want to face this. So what really stuck out to me was the history, the legacy, the work supported and led by Alan all of these years, 33 years plus, and having an opportunity to build for the next chapter. That is what really got me excited. You know, looking at the stakeholders in the Twin Cities, looking at the staff, looking at the board, it all made sense to me. More importantly, it is aligned with my purpose. You know, for me, and I say it through this process, I only want to do purpose-driven work. If I'm going to put all of my energy and effort behind something, this will be what I intend to put my efforts and energy behind. So it all really made sense to me.
Well, and it sounds like you certainly have a passion for affordable housing. There's been a need, obviously, for more affordable housing for a long time. It seems like that need is perhaps greater now than ever with the cost of new construction and everything else going on. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I would probably even argue and say we don't have a housing problem, we have an income problem because income is not keeping pace with the cost of housing. And more importantly, the two running side by side with the cost of housing, incomes, and this narrative around affordable housing makes it a very tough animal to really take on. So that is the challenge that Aeon and others that's doing this work are basically facing. So, but what's the old saying, with challenges comes opportunities. And I think it's a great opportunity to really take this on. So that's really what we're going to be facing going forward.
What are some of the tools you'd like to see to help advance the goals of more affordable housing? Just does it come down to more funding, creative financing tools?
Yeah, given, let me say it this way. We have to think about different strategies. I've written multiple pieces on why the current processes and approaches are just not going to get it done. We can continue to do that, but we also need to continuously come up with creative ways to attack this issue. So I think the answer is going to be finding the place of, I'm going to call it place of disruption, which is really new, innovative, creative ideas. Because I do believe in having experience around the country with this. I think funders, I think governments are looking for creative ideas. I don't think they're looking for the same thing over and over. And the good example was basically the $100 million fund we put together here in Dallas, and I can also say the same thing in Bloomington, because it was all creative ideas and it was done in a very fast period of time. So I think the answer is going to be in a space of creativity and finding new ways, because I think you hit it on point. Capital, equity returns at levels that does not make the numbers work, does not work in this space. So it's always a constant challenge trying to figure out how you're going to mesh together these series of sources to try and make a deal work. So that says to me, how do we work with our stakeholders and everyone else to come up with some creative ideas and test the boundaries of what we can do? And that's what I think it's going to be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You mentioned your work in Dallas. Can you talk about any particular projects there that you were able to move forward, or anything in particular that stands out from your experience there?
You know what? No, I would say it wouldn't necessarily stand out. What has stood out is how quickly we're able to start to build new tools, moving past the traditional is HUD, CDBG home, moving past tax credits, the same thing. So we're able to rewrite our tools to create more tools that would support affordable housing, creating the new fund, and also creating what's called a public facilities corporation sort of concept that allows for 80%, 100% of all taxes to be forgiven on affordable housing projects in perpetuity. That, in alignment with some of the tools and resources, we're able to do some pretty good work in a very short period of time. So I think it's going to come down to that type of thinking as well as we look at strategies to move the ball forward.
And what do you have any particular goals for Aeon? Just I know you're stepping into some big shoes there. Alan Arthur was around for what, more than 30 years, like you mentioned. But maybe it's time for fresh ideas too. So any thoughts on where you'd like to see the organization go?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think the team is a solid team. I think that we're going to be looking at what the future holds in terms of the strategies. But one thing I do want to zero in on is, it's two things. One, identification of a capital source that will be cheap enough to allow Aeon to do its work and not have to rely so heavily on just a governmental focus. That's number one. Number two is the issue of preservation. We're going to have to really ramp up preserving what's already there, because if you're losing, you're not going to be gaining, right? So those two things, I think it's going to be important. The first one is going to be important because it will give Aeon its space to breathe as it is starting to work through different strategies going forward.
Yeah, preserving that natural occurring affordable housing, that's a big deal. I think that's going to be a big continue to be a big focus going forward, right? Sorry, I lost you there for a couple seconds.
Yeah, that's okay.
Now, we were just talking a little bit about naturally occurring affordable housing, the NOAA housing. So it sounds like you're in the group that says that's going to be a big focus going forward, right?
Yeah, and what the challenge there is too, because an organization by the name of CoStar classified these properties as investment grade properties,
Mhm.
that says to investors, it's easier to acquire a property that's a little bit older and put a little money into it and raise the rents versus new construction, right? So you got this sort of dual fight going on there, trying to get them get access to those properties before those investors do, because investors will turn around and say, oh my goodness, oh wow, I can acquire this, I'm making up 500 unit complex built in the 1970s. Oh, I can throw some quick paint on it. Oh, I can raise the rent. You see that right there? That is a big challenge, because
Right.
you really follow the investment grade properties. These NOAA properties are actually in that category.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So you
Yeah.
got several things going on. Investors coming in, doing clean and scrape, rebuilding or changing the use. And then, or you have investors coming in and say, oh, that's a Class C property. You know, I can do a little paint here, put some cabinets in the kitchen or whatever, right? And raise the rents and the people are out, you know?
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's going to be the challenge. And how do you do this with not just speed, but partnerships and getting others to join along at the same time? And I would also say this is important for the region from an economic perspective. You know, if you ever hear me talk about this, you know, the more people spend on housing costs, the less they can spend on the economy. And
Mhm.
if you do the sort of analysis on what's lost there, the numbers would be staggering. But we don't really talk about it like that. So we're going to talk a lot more about that economic connection there and what it means for a competitive region, a competitive city.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about even things like student loan debt, and I think Alan Arthur has talked about this before too. If you're paying 500 a month to the bank, that's less, that much less that you can afford to spend on your home. So
Nope, that's absolutely right. Well,
yeah.
what's crazy about all of this, you know, I was a presidential fellow as well out of Minnesota State-Mankato. So I went straight from Mankato to Washington, D.C. And what I know that happens is these sort of peaks and valleys when it comes to resources. And one thing we can't get caught in is thinking that the federal government, in this sort of latest round of dollars that's out there, that's going to be a blip on the screen. That's going to last for a very small moment in time. The question is going to be, what mechanisms do we have in place for the long term that's going to be different and not have to rely on that, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, what else would you care to talk about? It looked like you had some experience with the city of Bloomington, led the creation of the city's opportunity housing ordinance, which I know is a big deal there. What can you tell me about that?
That, you know what, that was a great experience. And it's funny, I still talk to people in Bloomington. That was a great experience because it is the only ordinance it's the only city with an ordinance where it's mandatory. But the way we did it is that we created an ordinance that was not going to be prohibitive to development. So in other words, it actually helped development, quite honestly, because if you look at the projects that started taking off right after the ordinance, it was pretty successful. But what was really important there, at the time, Mayor Gene Winstead and the council, we did a lot of education. And I think Aeon is going to have to do the same thing. We went from um, a city saying, you know what, we have enough affordable housing, to a council saying, wait a minute, we need more affordable housing, because we really took the time to explain to them what the need was. And we went from saying we don't need any to we need more 30%, because they really understood what the issue was. And that's how we were able to create the ordinance and also turn around, create a trust fund, and turn around in less than 45 days, provide 7 million or so to Aeon to preserve a complex. If that work had not been done, there was no way that could have happened. So that work in Bloomington, I think, will be a model that Aeon can take to other communities and educate elected officials and everyone that it's not what you think it is. When we showed them behind the curtain what the occupations were and what people were making, it was like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. I thought affordable housing was these rundown projects that we see in Chicago or whatever, right? And it really changed the narrative. That lesson there, I think, is powerful to take to other communities that clearly need affordable housing and start to clear the way to do more projects, quite honestly.
Yeah, and you think about Bloomington there, and you think about the Mall of America and people working in retail there, and they need places to live that they can afford, and you want them to be able to live in the city, and so it really.
Well, and let me give you a great one. Bloomington has more hotels combined than Minneapolis and St. Paul together. And when we showed them that the base of the employment base in Bloomington was heavily in our hospitality industry and the restaurants and everything, they were like, oh my God, we had no idea. That's how we really made the difference to get the ordinance through. Besides, we worked with pretty much all of the major developers, going to them, asking the questions. So, about, hey, what do you think? What are the reasons that are preventing you from actually creating affordable housing? We adjusted for those issues inside the ordinance, right? We went to Aeon, to Common Bond, to PPL. We had conversations with everybody, to the community, and took all of that together and created the document. And that's how it became so successful. That same thinking we'll do here in Aeon as we start to not just work in Minneapolis, St. Paul, because I think the opportunities are really deep in the suburbs, quite honestly, that exists. The question is going to be, how do you crack those environments and start to put up more housing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds like you have a lot of great ideas and are bringing a lot of energy to the organization. So congrats on the new job. I know like we said, you start in February. What are you doing between now and then? And are you just kind of getting to know some of the folks and getting your dipping your toes in the water, so to speak?
Yeah, what I'm doing is I have a philosophy. The job starts before you walk in the door. So I'm doing a lot of reading, a lot of research. I will actually be in the Twin Cities next week, spending some time with the board and the executive team before I get there. So I'm sort of balancing closing things out in Dallas, because when the announcement came in Dallas, I had two things going on. Great excitement in the Twin Cities. Here in Dallas, my goodness, don't leave, please stay. So, closing out things here and getting ready to head to the Twin Cities, shopping for housing. And I think you know this, unless you are moving fast to purchase one of these homes, they're just flying off very quickly.
Oh yeah.
So we're going through that experience right now, trying to identify a house, get our son in school and everything. So that's what we're focusing on right now.
Okay. So you're getting, do you have a family, kids in school and things like that, or?
Yeah. My son is 10, he's in the 4th grade. My wife, we are planning on making the move. We've actually already sold our home here. We're set for closing, and we should be there probably the weekend of the 28th or something like that of January, well, this month.
Okay.
So it's easy for us too, because we're in Bloomington. We could easily go back to school where my son was at, to make it very simple for him. He still has his friends in school, so should be a pretty good transition.
That's great. Well, congrats again on the new job, Eric. Really appreciate your time.
Yep.
Hopefully we can stay in touch, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of projects to talk about going forward and issues.
Absolutely.
So
well, with a name like Brian Johnson, I'll be calling you.
sounds good. Hey, we Johnsons have to stick together.
Absolutely. All right, I appreciate it, and look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
All right. Thanks.